In fact, here are two fundamental origin questions. Where did the universe come from, and life? What caused the universe and what caused life? Well, we've just been talking about the universe, that it exploded into being out of nothing. Now we're going to see that not only did it explode into being out of nothing, it did so with extreme precision. This is sometimes called the anthropic principle. Anthropos is the Greek word meaning mankind. The theory here is that the universe is so fine-tuned, so tweaked for human life, that there must be a designer behind it. Now you say, how fine-tuned is it? Well, we'll start with Stephen Hawking. Here's what he said. If the expansion rate of the universe was different by 1 part in 1,000 million a second after the Big Bang, the universe would have collapsed back on itself or never developed galaxies. You change the expansion rate that infinitesimal amount, we're not here. In other words, no cosmic evolution can explain this. These are initial conditions of the universe. Somebody put initial conditions into the Big Bang to allow it to expand and create galaxies to this point. If that expansion rate was any different, we wouldn't be here. Not only were the initial conditions just right, so are conditions right now. If the gravitational force were altered by more than 1 part in 10 to the 40, we wouldn't be here. What's 1 part in 10 to the 40? That's 1 with 40 zeros following it. 1 part in that, very small number. In fact, assuming the universe is 13.7 billion years old, how many seconds is that? That's 10 to the 17 seconds. What's the difference between 10 to the 17 and 10 to the 18? 10. You're adding another 0. We're at 10 to the 40 here. Now to show you the extreme precision here, take a tape measure and stretch it across the entire known universe. That's a long way. Set the gravitational force at a particular inch mark on that tape measure. I know gravity's not measured in inches. This is just to give you a scale idea. If you were to move the strength of gravity 1 inch in either direction on that scale, we wouldn't be here. That's 1 in 10 to the 40 precision. I don't have enough faith to believe that that value just got there by accident. Somebody put it there. Now, the same is true, by the way, with our solar system. Where are we in the solar system? There we are, a third rock from the sun, right there, right? If we were just a little bit closer to or a little bit further away, we wouldn't be here. A little bit closer to, we'd burn up. A little bit further away, we'd freeze. We are what scientists call the Goldilocks zone. It is not too hot. It is not too cold. It is just right. The axial tilt, 23.5 degrees. Change that slightly, we don't exist. Earth rotation, 24 hours. Change that slightly, we don't exist. The size and distance of the moon from us, change that slightly, we don't exist. If Jupiter was not in its current orbit, we would not be here. Why not? Because Jupiter's size makes it a cosmic vacuum cleaner. Its gravitational force attracts many of the meteors and space junk to it. In fact, I'm rooting for Jupiter in 2040. Okay. Saturn, same thing. You take a close-up look at Jupiter, you know what these purple marks are? Those purple marks are comet fragment strikes that are bigger than the Earth. Thank God for Jupiter. Because if Jupiter was not there, we wouldn't be here today. You want to get the size idea of Jupiter? Check this out. It's Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Earth. Look at poor Pluto down here. You know, Pluto recently has been demoted as a planet. I don't know about you, but I think it's size discrimination. Look at this. There's the Earth. You can hardly see Pluto. The Sun, check this out. Here's the Sun over here. That's Arcturus, another star in our galaxy. Jupiter is 1 size on this scale. Earth is invisible. Pluto, forget about it. All right, keep an eye on Arcturus for a second. You got Arcturus? Now look at this. Where's Arcturus? There's Arcturus right there. To the left of the white star Rigel. That's Antares, another star in our galaxy. Jupiter, the Sun is 1 pixel in size on this scale. Visible. Earth, Pluto, forget about it. That's just in our galaxy. In fact, Betelgeuse, right here. Yes, I know it's a movie. But if the Earth was the size of a golf ball, Betelgeuse would be 5 or 6 Empire State Buildings high. This is just in our galaxy. Heavens are awesome. The average distance between stars in our galaxy is 30 trillion miles. All that distance is necessary for us to exist here in this life-supporting position. Now, 30 trillion miles, how far is that? Far. Take you at least 2 tanks of gas on a Toyota Prius to go 30 trillion miles. That is, if the gas pedal doesn't stick. Now, a number of years ago, I was out in the Desert Museum in Tucson, Arizona. You guys ever been out in the Desert Museum at night, when a clear night, no city lights? It was so clear we could see satellites in orbit. And the guide who was with us said, hey, if we look up at 9:03, we're going to see the space shuttle in orbit. I said, well, come on, we're not going to see the space shuttle. It's only 120 feet long. It's 350 miles up. We're not going to see it. Oh, me of little faith. At 9:03, the guy goes, whoop! We look up in the western sky about 70 degrees above the horizon. There's an object streaking across the sky relative to us about like this. I mean, it is really cooking. When it gets right about here, it disappears. I don't know whether Scotty beamed it up or what. But it was cruising across the sky and suddenly it was gone. Now when the space shuttle is in orbit, the space shuttle is traveling at about 18,000 miles an hour. That's 5 miles per second. You got trouble getting to school in the morning? Take the space shuttle. 5 miles a second. Think about that. Now, I did a little calculation to try and figure out how long would it take us to go 30 trillion miles if we could get in the space shuttle at our star, the Sun, and start traveling to another star in our galaxy an average distance away, 30 trillion miles. How long would it take us? 5 miles a second. Anyone? It would take us 201,450 years. That means if you got into the space shuttle at the time of Christ and started traveling to another star in our galaxy an average distance away, you'd be less than 1/100th of the way there right now. And we're going to explore space! No, we're not. We are not going anywhere in space. Who'd like to go the next nearest star? We'll go! Get in the space shuttle, kids! Dad, are we almost there yet? 200,000 more years, play more Xbox. Think about that. How many stars are out there? The number of stars out there, conservative estimate, about equivalent to the number of grains of sand on all the beaches on all the Earth. You see the picture here on the left? You see that square right there? That's this square from the Hubble Space Telescope. Those are stars, heavenly bodies. February 1st, 2003, President of the United States goes into the East Room in the White House. They turn the TV camera on. Every major network carries his address. Why? It's Saturday morning. He looks into the camera. He says, my fellow Americans, this morning our nation experienced a great tragedy. Upon re-entry into the atmosphere, the space shuttle Columbia burned up in the skies over Texas. There are no survivors. The Columbia is lost. The President then went on to quote from Isaiah chapter 40 and verse 25. Why Isaiah chapter 40? Because in Isaiah chapter 40, God is speaking according to Isaiah. And here's what God says. To whom will you compare me, or who is my equal, says the Holy One. In other words, you want to know what I'm like? Here's a comparison. Lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these stars and named them one by one? Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. The President then looked back in the camera and said, the same God that created and named all those stars is the same God that created and knows the names of the 7 astronauts who perished today. While they did not return safely home to us, we can all now pray that they've all returned safely home. You want to know who God is? Most Christians have the wrong idea of who God is. We think God is like a big angel. God is not a big angel. You want to know who God is? Remove all limits from your mind. That's God. If God is an ounce of any attribute, He's infinite in that attribute. Ounce of love, infinite love. Ounce of justice, infinite justice. Ounce of power, infinite power. He is the standard by which everything else is measured. Why is there a second commandment? Thou shalt make no graven image. One reason there's a second commandment is that any image you make of an infinite being necessarily limits his majesty. You can't draw a picture of an infinite being. Everything we know is finite. So any picture limits him. The closest thing in our experience to infinity are the heavens. That's why Psalm 103 verse 11 says, God's love to those that fear him exceed the height of the heavens above the earth. How high are the heavens above the earth? Stars equivalent to grains of sand on all the beaches on all the earth. 200,000 years at 5 miles a second between those stars. Infinite from our perspective. That's the point. It's not just, however, when you look out into a telescope you can see incredible design. When you look in at a microscope you can see the same. Do you see this? This is a one-celled amoeba. Something that the Darwinists say we all evolved from. You heard the theory of macroevolution, from the goo to you via the zoo? In Darwin's day, this was not considered to be any big deal. That maybe natural forces could come together and create a one-celled amoeba, and from that point on, natural selection could take over, and voila, here we all are. Today we know, however, that this cell is far more complex and has far more information in it than we ever dreamed of. In fact, a cell is like a city of all sorts of interlocking and interconnected functions going on and off, and we don't even understand all the stuff going on in the cell. But what we do understand is this. In order to demonstrate it to you, let me take you to your breakfast table. How many people in here like alphabet cereal? Anyone like alphabet cereal? Let's suppose you want to have a bowl of alphabet cereal. You're a teenager. One day you come downstairs to have a bowl of alphabet cereal, and you see the cereal's knocked over on the table, and right in the middle of the table the letters spell, "Take out the garbage, Mom." What are you going to assume? The cat knocked the box over? Earthquake shook the house? No, you're going to say that that's intelligent design from an intelligent being, Mom. Or let's say you're walking along the beach one day and you see in the sand, "John loves Mary." What are you going to assume? The waves did that? Crabs came out of the water and made that message? No, you're going to say there had to be some intelligent being that has done that. Why? Because you know in all your prior experience that messages only come from minds. They don't come from natural forces. In fact, this is the whole premise of the SETI program. You guys know the SETI program. Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. You guys see the movie Contact with Jodie Foster? That's a real program. It's still out there. Carl Sagan helped get it funded by the government many years ago. What, they got all these antennas out there looking for signals from outer space. And Sagan said if we get one sentence from outer space, it'll prove ET is out there. One sentence. Because he knows that natural forces don't create messages like that. Well, if natural forces don't create messages, where does this message come from? DNA. Every living thing has DNA. You have DNA, I have DNA, a banana has DNA. And DNA spells out a message. Like take out the garbage, Mom. It's just a lot more complicated and a lot longer. You say, how much longer? How much DNA is in a one-celled amoeba? Before I tell you that, let me give you an idea of how big an amoeba is. You can line up several hundred amoebas up in an inch. And in each one of them, you're going to have about 30 or 1,000 volumes of an Encyclopedia Britannica worth of information in there. 1,000 volumes of an Encyclopedia Britannica information. I don't have enough faith to believe that happened by natural forces. To say so would be like saying that the Ohio State Library resulted from an explosion in a printing shop. I don't have enough faith to believe that. It seems like the first life requires an intelligent cause. You say, well, who told you this? Some Christian? No, you know who told me this? Richard Dawkins. In his book, The Blind Watchmaker. Even he admits there's that much information in there. Which may be one reason why, if you saw the movie Expelled, did anyone see the movie Expelled? At the end of the movie Expelled, he's being interviewed by Ben Stein, and he asked Richard Dawkins, how do you think life began? Initially, Dawkins said, I have no idea. And Stein said, what do you think your best guess is? And he said, well, I suppose you could say life was brought here by aliens. Aliens. At that point, Ben Stein said, I don't believe it. Dr. Dawkins believes in intelligent design. Why? An alien's an intelligent designer, right? Now, why is Dawkins okay with an intelligent designer inside the universe, but not an intelligent designer outside the universe? I have a theory, just speculation, because an intelligent designer like an alien inside the universe does not bring morality with them. but God does. Now, of course, you'd have to explain where the intelligent designer inside the universe came from, because if natural laws can't create life here, why can they create it somewhere else in the universe to create the alien to bring life here? Now, this, again, is not God of the gaps reasoning. Why? Because we don't just lack a natural explanation for this kind of information. It's that such information is positive, empirically verifiable evidence for an intelligent being. When you see take out the garbage mom, you don't just lack an explanation there. You don't just lack a natural explanation. You go, that's just like mom. Only intelligent beings can do that. Now, I wish we had more time to talk about biology, but we don't. We've got to move on to the moral law and then get to your questions. But let me just say one other thing about biology. We were all here in the womb at 11 weeks at some point, right? Let me ask you a question as we look at this. Is that animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? That's human, right? In fact, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Let's go back to when your mother and your father got together. You guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. When your mother and your father got together, your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race. And you won. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat out 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. You beat out 300 million others. Now, seeing some of you kind of limp in here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the gene pool, but you were. Now, your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half the genetic information that makes you you. And your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence, and it contained the other half of the genetic information that makes you you. And when your egg and when your soldier and your egg got together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. You have not received any more genetic information from that point till right now. It's only multiplied itself. In fact, there's only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the child in the womb? It's genetically the same. And by the way, what I just said there has nothing to do with religion. It has nothing to do with the often misused separation of church and state. And it is not above anybody's pay grade to know. Everybody, it's just a scientific fact that that's a genetic human being from that point on. Now, from that point till right now, a construction project of astonishing complexity began taking place. Cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second. Some cells became brain cells, others became lung cells, others became heart cells. How did they know how to do this? Nobody knows. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues till right now. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. Knock it off! How do you know how to do this? I don't have enough faith to believe there's not intelligence behind life. There appears to be intelligence behind life. If something appears so, maybe it is. Last thing, the moral argument. We've given some evidence from science that a creator and designers out there. Now let's take a look at the moral argument. Back in December 2010, I went on a trip with a friend of mine who's the real Indiana Jones. His name is Bob Cornu. And this trip, we went on a Noah's Ark expedition before. I'll tell you about that tomorrow night. But this trip was not all that adventurous in terms of danger, but it was certainly interesting because we started in London and we went into France and hit many World War II sites and Reformation sites. We went to Normandy, which was amazing. We went to several cathedrals throughout Germany and France. We went to where Martin Luther tacked his 95 Theses on the Wittenberg Castle wall in 1517. And before we got there, we stopped in Wiedmar, Germany, where the Buchenwald concentration camp is. In April of 1945, the Allies liberated the camp. They went through the front gate, which is still there. Then they looked to the right and saw the crematorium, which is still there. When they got down to the crematorium, they looked in the courtyard attached to the crematorium, and this is what they saw. Brace yourself. Now, if there is no God, that's not objectively morally wrong. That's just your opinion against Hitler's opinion. There's no standard beyond humanity. It's just two opinions. Now, we all intuitively understand this is not just a matter of opinion. This is really wrong. Then there must be a standard outside of ourselves. That standard is God's very nature. In fact, how do you know who's right, or how do you discover who's right and who's wrong? Is it Mother Teresa or is it Hitler? Well, let me ask you the question this way. How do you know which map of Scotland is better? What would you need to see in order to know which map of Scotland is better? You need to see a real unchanging place called Scotland. If Scotland doesn't exist, these two maps are meaningless. But since Scotland does exist, we can compare these two maps and say, map A, while it's not perfect, is a better representation of the real Scotland than is map B. In other words, we measure the two choices by the real unchanging standard. That's exactly what we do when we compare Mother Teresa and Hitler. Mother Teresa wasn't the standard. Hitler wasn't the standard. There's a standard beyond both of them by which we measure both of them. And we say Mother Teresa measured up to that standard better than did Hitler. God is the unchanging standard. That's one reason God doesn't change. Now notice I'm not saying this is how you know, knowing morality. That's not the issue. You can be an atheist and know morality. You can be an atheist and be moral. That's not the point. The point is you can't justify morality if there's no standard beyond humanity. In fact, if there is no objective morality, then the Nazis were not wrong. I was at Michigan State a couple of years ago. No hisses there. During the Q&A, there were a couple atheists were sitting over here. We got talking about morality. I said, well, what's your standard of morality? How do you discover what's right and wrong? And what's your standard for it? And one atheist said, whatever the majority decides is morally right. I said, are you telling me that if you lived in Nazi Germany and just voted to kill Jews, that killing Jews would be morally right? And he paused, he blushed, his upper lip quivered, and he went, yes. And his atheist buddy sitting right next to him looked at him and yelled, no! The kid knew the answer was no, but in order to be consistent with his atheism, he had to say yes. Look, if there's no standard outside of us, it's just one person's opinion against another. Evolution doesn't help. Evolution can't give you a moral law. Evolution's a biological process. It can't give you immaterial moral law. Love is no better than rape if there's no objective morality. Freedom is no better than slavery. Not objectively anyway. Religious crusades are not wrong. Last night at Ohio University, the last guy, we went through some Q&A, and he asked two really good questions, which I answered. And then, as he's running out the door, he said, but religious people have committed crusades! So? They're not wrong if atheism's true. There's nothing wrong, objectively. In fact, tolerance is no better than intolerance. And you can't complain about the problem of evil if there's no objective morality. C.S. Lewis was an atheist. And one of the reasons is because he saw too much injustice in the world. One day he had an epiphany. And he realized that if there's injustice in the world, there must be justice. And if there must be justice, there must be a God. Here's how Lewis put it in Mere Christianity. As an atheist, my argument against God was that the universe seems so cruel and unjust. But how would I got this idea of just and unjust? A man doesn't crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. What was I comparing this universe with when I called just? There's nothing to compare it to. Look, the shadows prove the sunshine. If you've got evil, it means you've got good. If you've got shadows, it means you've got sunshine. Oh, you can have sunshine without shadows. You can have good without evil, but you can't have evil without good. You can't have shadows without sunshine. So evil does not disprove God. Evil may prove there's a devil out there. But evil does not disprove God, because there'd be no such thing as evil unless there was a standard of good. And God is the standard of good. Let me be very clear again with what we are saying and what we're not saying. I had to make this clear with Hitchens a couple times. I still don't know if he ever got it. But I had to say, look, I'm not saying atheists can't be moral. They can. I'm not saying atheists don't know morality. They do. What I'm saying is atheists can't justify morality. They can theorize about how we know murder is wrong, but atheism provides no immaterial objective standard that establishes why murder is wrong. This is the difference between epistemology and ontology. This is a distinction, because I hear people making this mistake all the time. Oh, I know morality and I can be a moral person. Agree, 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 agree. You don't need the Bible to know morality either. It's written on your heart. You know it intuitively. It's self-evident on the big issues. You may get more details in the Bible, but on the big issues, everyone knows morality. That's not the point. The point is, how do you justify morality? If we're just molecules in motion, why not kill to get what you want? There is no way to justify. By the way, an analogy here would be to say, I learned the times tables from my 4th grade teacher, Mr. Fisher. That's how I came to know them. That's epistemology. But the times tables existed independently of me or Mr. Fisher. Long before I lived or he lived, 4 times 4 equals 16. The same thing is true with morality. I may know morality or I may not know morality, but it exists independent of me. If the Nazis had won World War II and taken over the entire world and brainwashed everybody to believe that killing Jews was right, it would still be wrong. Because it's not our decision, it's God's nature. An immaterial, objective standard of justice requires a theistic God. So when my friend Christopher Hitchens writes a book, God is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything. First of all, what's this word poison? It's a nice way of saying religion's evil. Or a fun way of saying religion's evil. But the problem here is there can be no evil unless there's good. In fact, Christopher, if you read his book, has a lot of truth in his book, but he's mad at God. He's angry at God. In fact, he doesn't call himself an atheist. He calls himself an anti-theist. He says, God's a divine dictator. I will not bow my knee to a divine dictator. Which is why on both occasions, both debates, my closing statement, I said, you can sum up Christopher Hitchens' book in one sentence. Here it is. There is no God, and I hate him. He's mad at God. By the way, if you're mad at God, that's fine. He can take it. He's perfect. You can shout at him and curse him all day. You're not going to diminish him. You can worship him all day. You're not going to make him any better. Read that book. Many of the prophets are mad at God. He can take it. He's perfect. Can't change him for the better or the worse. By the way, religion does not poison everything. Everything poisons religion. I poison religion because I don't live up to the pure words of Christ. In fact, Christopher's book, he talks about all the evil stuff religious people have done. I say, in fact, I said to him, I said, Christopher, I'm a hypocrite. I can't live up to that book, but if I could, I wouldn't need a Savior. The very fact that I can't live up to that book is evidence I need a Savior. You're actually helping prove our worldview. We are fallen. And when people tell me I can't go to church anymore because of all those hypocrites down there, we say, come on down, pal, we got room for one more. We're all hypocrites. In fact, if you're not a hypocrite, your standards are too low. You might want to raise your standards up a little bit. Now, let's sum all this up and get to your questions. These are the 3 arguments we said that we would show there's a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful, moral, personal out there. And from the cosmological argument, we can see this being is immaterial, timeless, and spaceless. Why? Because he created material, time, and space, so he must transcend material, time, and space. We also know this being must be extremely powerful because he created out of nothing. From the teleological argument, we know he's extremely intelligent. He put this universe together with extreme precision. We also know that he has purpose. We're here for a reason. From the moral argument, we know he's absolutely morally perfect. And we also know he's personal. How do we know he's personal from the moral argument? Because you only have a moral obligation to persons. You don't have a moral obligation to impersonal. When you go try and dunk a basketball, you're not sinning against the law of gravity. Okay? We also know he's personal from the cosmological argument. Why? To go from a state of non-existence to a state of existence, someone had to make a choice, and only persons make choices. Impersonal forces don't make choices. Gravity doesn't decide, well, look, if he drops that one more time, I'm not going to pull it to the ground. This is why Stephen Hawking's book, The Grand Design, which came out September of 2010, has a big problem in it. One of the big problems is Hawking says on page 181, I think it is, he says, because there is a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. What? First of all, gravity can't decide to do anything. And secondly, gravity only exists in the space-time continuum. Gravity itself was created, so it can't be the creator. But this is the kind of nonsense that some people are spouting to try and avoid what appears to be evidence for a beginner, i.e. God. Now notice we have an immaterial, timeless, spaceless, extremely powerful, extremely intelligent, purposeful, morally perfect, personal creator. This is the God of biblical Christianity identified without reference to the Bible. We have not quoted any Bible verses yet. We're simply saying that these three give us a theistic God. So, if theism is true, what does that say about pantheism and atheism? Law of non-contradiction. They can't be true. Now, does this mean at this point Christianity is true? No. We don't have enough evidence yet. We know that maybe one of these theisms can't be true, right? Because they're theistic. It's possible they just have theism right, but nothing else. That's true too. But we know that none of these world religions could be true. Why? Because they're all non-theistic. Now, I am not saying, hear me again, I am not saying everything taught by the religions on the right is false. I'm simply saying that where they differ from theism, they appear to be false. They appear to have the existence and nature of a theistic God wrong, because all these worldviews are non-theistic. They may be right about other things, but when it comes to the existence and nature of God, they appear to have it wrong. So, which one of these world religions is true? If God exists and He wanted to tell us which one is true, what could He do that would tell us which one is true? He could do something only He could do, and that would be a miracle. And that's where we're going to come back tomorrow night and pick it up right there. Are miracles possible? But before we end, I got to go back to where we started. Remember this guy? Francis Crick. Looks a little creepy, doesn't he? Remember his astonishing hypothesis? Is that you, your joys, your sorrows, your memories, your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will are in fact no more than the behavior of vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules? Let me ask you guys a question. Now that you know the Roadrunner tactic, remember that? What if Crick had written this in his book? What if he had said, the astonishing hypothesis is that my scientific conclusions that I write in this book are in fact no more than the behavior of vast assembly of nerve cells and associated molecules? Would anybody read any further? No. Materialism is self-defeating. It's self-defeating because it says that we're just molecules in motion. Well, how do we come up with that theory? By molecules in motion. So why should we believe it? We have no warrant to believe anything, whether it's atheism, evolution, or anything else, if we're just molecules in motion. We're just reacting. We're not really reasoning. We're like a can of Coke fizzing. We're not really thinking. So what is the purpose of your life? It's not a glorified Monopoly game, but we're going to cover that tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll come for part 2. How many can come for part 2, by the way?